Let's assume the brain is a model maker. Sense organs relay some sort of signals to parts of the brain. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the nerves. These sense organs are collections of cells, which are collections of molecules, which are collections of atoms, which are collections of quarks, on down to the cosmic foam. The brain then interprets the sense organ data to create a model of the world, and the degree to which the world we see is constructed by the brain is underappreciated by almost everyone. I know I underappreciate it. It's typically only appreciated when some part of the brain is corrupted. Now, I'm not trying to talk down to the viewer, I'm just framing what I'm going to say here. Our very existence is predicated on modeling the world. It is impossible to be opposed to all mental models. Just walking down the street requires that the input of the matter beneath what is objectively called our feet be modeled as something relatively solid, like sidewalk. Even though the atoms don't actually touch between our feet and the sidewalk, the senses relayed to the brain make a model of our foot touching the ground. When one looks at the brain that way, it's easy to see that the brain exists to modalize reality. This is because the brain doesn't have the ability to direct process the cosmic foam. Even if the brain could direct process at the atomic level, the atoms are just a model. It has to create models. Now, these models are very general. In fact, they are necessarily general because if they were apodictic, they would be useless. Models have use because they are incomplete and isolate relevant elements. For example, opening a door. A young child learns to pull a handle down, and that creates a model for opening doors. You pull the handle down. If the child went up to another door, and it's a rounded knob, the child may try to pull the knob down vertically. This will fail, but the child will notice that the knob moved one way when he tried to pull it down, unless he pulled it down in absolutely symmetrical force relative to the installation of the rounded knob. But anyway, he'll probably see it turn one way or another, or almost certainly he will see it turn one way or another, and may attempt to turn it that way. If this succeeds, the child has learned how to open another type of door. So not only does he know how to open two types of doors, but he also knows that different doors may open in different ways, which we could call the metaphysics of opening doors. In the same way, we know how to walk on different surfaces, open different wrappers and bottles, twist all sorts of knobs, levers, spigots, locks, hooks, knots, and none is exactly the same. The idea of a sheep shank knot is just a modal concept. The idea of a knot itself is just a modal concept. My theory here is that dreams modalize the world. They take things that were learned in the day and modalize them. They extract the concepts and apply them universally, which is why dreams seem so bizarre. And it's also why you don't see the dreams as being bizarre as you would if you were awake, because you're just experiencing the essential components of the model. Right? You're only processing the essential components of the model. For example, a little child who is terrorized by his parents may have dreams about running and hiding from monsters. Now, psychiatrists used to theorize that having a monster in place of the parent keeps the child loving the parent in waking life. That is, a monster is used instead of the parent in order for the child to be able to function in day-to-day life, and this monster can, for example, in a dream can be another person. But I would respond by claiming that the monster, or perhaps a series of monsters, are used to modalize the concept of escaping horrible beings. And this makes sense, because there are children who will have dreams of their parents being zombies or monsters, so we know that it's not always censored. And caricaturing the parents as monsters serves to modalize the concept that my parents are horrible people. Perhaps censoring out the parent at an early age was an evolutionary advantage, because children who ran away from their parents tended to die out. And so, not explicitly using the parent in the nightmare could be a product of both evolutionary censorship and the modalization process. That is my explanation of dreams. It is the brain integrating concepts, blasting concepts through the neurons. But the brain as a modalizer, or this brain as modalizer theory, also explains why kids love cartoons so much, and it explains why cartoons become more different different as people get older. Cartoons modelize reality, and as the kids get older, the model becomes more and more realistic until by the time people are adults, they're watching sitcoms. This also explains the extreme complexity of fantasy. Some nerds become obsessed with Star Wars as a young kid, but as they get older, they demand a more and more realistic model of reality to play with, a more realistic dreamscape, which is why Star Wars is detailed to an insane degree and why Klingon is an actual language. Instead of growing up into sitcoms and news shows, these folks advance down a similar path, though one that is a bit stigmatized. Lastly, the modalization theory explains why anime porn is so hot. Anime porn captures the elements of the human body key to sexual arousal. It shows the body, but none of the zits or blemishes. The face has really big eyes, which intensify the facial expressions, and the body is just a few lines to show the body parts. If properly appreciated, anime porn can relay all of the patterns necessary for sexual arousal in a perfectly constructed manner, as opposed to the natural variation and clutter of a real human. However, because anime porn is constructed in a top-down manner, it cannot capture all of the charming tics that makes a human, but it can come close, especially in a static image. All of this is why I don't think it is productive to explicitly study metaphysics or epistemology any more than it is useful to study the mechanics of walking for the average person. The mind, uncorrupted by superstition and raised in what is usually termed a progressive manner, will be able to make metaphysical arguments without any difficulty. And if there is superstition, well, it's very easy to Socratically debunk superstition without having to explicitly bring up the words metaphysics and epistemology and deal with a meta of a meta, right? Like or a categorization of a meta discussion. So when I hear someone say, let's define our epistemology, I know I'm probably in for some bullshit. Not always, but I'm probably in for some bullshit. And in case the viewer didn't know, this video was about metaphysics and epistemology, and I didn't have to use either of those terms to explain my little theory here. However, I do believe these things should be understood one time, similar to how we learn about how the body works, but then we just let the body flow in our day-to-day life. Similar to metaphysics and epistemology. Learn about it, but then just let it flow.